Hey guys, welcome back to Greg's Fish Room. That's right, I've been gone for over 3 years, but I'm finally back. So it's high time we do a fish room update because basically everything has changed down here in the fish room. We have a lot of exciting things to talk about today, so come along with me and learn how to be a better aquarist. All right, Greg's Fish Room. This is the winter of 2023, and yes, I've been gone for a while. It's been over 3 years since I published a video on YouTube, and I'm sure I'll get into why and where I've been and what I've been up to, but until then, I wanted to go through and share everything that's changed down here because it's basically everything. So what I hope to do first and foremost is we'll look at all the tanks, see all the fish that I'm keeping and why I'm keeping them. And then second, I'd like to go through all of the systems from the racks to the tanks to the plumbing to the lighting, everything, just so you can get an understanding of how this fish room operates. I know people like the little details and they like to understand how I set things up so that they can consider doing some of those things themselves. So right off, before we even get into the room, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is my live streaming desk. Yes, that's right. I've been watching a lot of people's live streams over the past few years, especially with the pandemic. It's been great to be able to keep up with people, even though we haven't been able to meet in person. And so I have constructed a live streaming setup here, and I'm hoping to start live streaming here very shortly. As you can see, everything is set up and ready to go. The only thing I have left to do is paint the wall a green screen green, and after I do that, I should be ready to go. So let's jump into the tanks and quickly talk through the fish that are in them. And we'll go one by one and sort of start at the bottom here and zigzag our way up to the top. Right off, these are all 50-gallon lowboy aquariums from Zoomed, and so the dimensions are 2 foot by 4 foot by about 10 inches tall, which is great. I love the dimensions of this tank, and the reason I selected it is because it basically maximizes the surface area that you can expect out of an aquarium. My fish that I keep don't need a lot of water height, but they do need a lot of surface area. So I thought it was the perfect tank for me, and that's why I selected it. Down here on the bottom tank, you can see we have a breeding colony of albino ancestris, and we have a few limias in here as well, the limia vittata. And this is probably one of the most boring tanks in the fish room, so we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it. But I do have these nice cave racks. It uses a piece of slate with some PVC pipe risers as feet, which helps keep all of the caves, the pleco caves, up off the ground, which keeps them a little bit more clean and tidy for the plecos to use. And as you can see, they love them. So we'll talk about constructing those in a future video, but for now, this is it. We've got albino ancestris and some limia vittatas. The next tank over, we have, again, not a very interesting tank. Some of these tanks still need to be filled in, and so this is another one of them. In this tank, we have a few super red ancestris, and we have some Zoogenicus tequila. And this is a Goodeids, and it's a pretty amazing one, but I don't have a very big colony here yet. So it's gonna be hard to see both of these fish because they're pretty good at hiding, and it's sort of difficult to get a good shot of them. So maybe in the future we'll see more of them, but in here is the super red ancestris and Zoogenicus tequila. All right, next tank over, we have a giant mishmash of fish which need to be sorted out and maybe put into some of their own tanks. In this tank, the two primary fish that you're going to see are the Scyphia francescae, and those are the ones that have the cool body shape with the weird looking fins. And the other one that you're gonna see in here, they're a little bit more stout of a fish, and those are the Xenotuca doderi. Both of these are more Goodeids, and as you can see very quickly, I'm gravitating towards Goodeids in this fish room setup. All right, this next tank is a lot of fun, and right now most of these are hiding, but this is the pea wattle. This is the Spanish Ribbed Newt, and these guys are cool, especially when they're breeding. It's very easy to tell the females are quite a bit larger and more plump, and the males are a little bit more slender, and they've got these little Superman arms that they try to wrap around the female. And they're just awesome. They're almost exactly like an axolotl, honestly, in shape and size, in their life cycle. Really the only difference is the eggs that they lay are a little bit smaller than an axolotl, and when the fry hatch, they are less aggressive towards each other. They're less cannibalistic, and as you can see in their adult form here, they have no external gills. Those gills go away, those external gills go away when the fry are, I don't know, about an inch to an inch and a half long. All right, moving up one level on the rack. This tank, again, probably has too many species in it. Some of these are actually going back outside in the greenhouse once the springtime hits. And so some of these fish are just being overwintered here in the fish room. And so in this tank, we have the Wabenmuster pleco. These guys, it's an ancistrus pleco, but it's got a honeycomb pattern. It's really interesting. They're very difficult to film because they're always hiding. Two other fish that we have in here, we have Vietnamese white clouds, mountain minnows, and the last fish that we have in here is the rainbow shiner. And these were a recent addition to the fish room. I've grown them out. They are breeding size now, and they are spectacular. It is a US native fish, and it is just amazing. So next tank over here, we have, of course, the N-class black bar endler. I've got a big colony of these. Always excited to keep these. They are a lot of fun to keep and to have. This tank has 1,000,000 regular brown ancistrus plecos. They are just everywhere, and so I'm gonna need to offload some of these at some club auctions here pretty quickly to get this population back under control. Ideally, what we have is like one male and one female for every cave or every other cave that's in the tank, and then we need to clear out the rest so that there's no fighting, there's not too much competition, and we keep the population under control. Also in this tank, we have golden white clouds. So we just saw the Vietnamese white clouds. These are the regular white clouds, but it's the golden color morph. And so those two will be going outdoors in the greenhouse in an IBC tote. Looking forward to that. Okay, next tank over here, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on. The first is that this tank is just absolutely packed full of regular white cloud mountain minnows. And I started with 6 of these last summer, and I put them in an IBC tote in my greenhouse, and by the end of the summer, I'm not kidding you, I had at least 1,000 full-grown fish. And I got rid of most of those in the club auctions, and what I have left is in this tank, and they will also be going outside this spring in an IBC tote in the greenhouse, and I expect to get a ton more of these. So super excited about that. We've got a lot of Paleatus cories in here, which is one of my favorite cory cats. Also in this tank are some snow white ancistrus, which are very cool. This is one of the newer color morphs that are out there. They're a little bit more expensive, harder to find, but I'm really looking forward to these. Really looking forward to growing these out to a larger size and getting them breeding. All right, last tank on this level. We got quite a bit going on in here too. The normal stuff in here, we've got some regular Aeneas cory cats. We have a few different species of other fish here. We've got the Scyphia multipunctata, which is similar to the Scyphia francesca that we saw earlier. Again, they've got some really cool shapes to the fins, and so we've got quite a few of those. We have the Daisy's blue rice fish in here, and this is one that I'm super excited about because it's the only one that I've had success with breeding. Also in here we have some regular Ancestris plecos, and there are some black chin livebearers in here as well swimming around. All right, going up to the top level. So this first tank we're looking at here is Chaptalictes and Costus, and this is a new fish for me in the fish room. I don't have a whole lot of them. I got them at a local auction recently, and I think I only started with 6 or 8 fish, and I think I've doubled, maybe tripled that number of fish at this point, but I've got a lot of work to do on these fish. There's a few in here that are quite old and are at end of life, and I've got quite a few that are very young, and you know, hopefully I've got enough here to get me started and to get a big colony of these going relatively quickly. Over here we have a very similar fish. This is Chaptalictes pardalis. These are all Goodeids as well, and these ones I have a very hardy breeding colony of these. As you can see, there is just an absolute crap ton of these guys in this tank. They are a stunning fish. They grow big. They're extremely peaceful. They don't eat their fry. And one really interesting thing about these fish is they're live bearers, but when they give birth to their fish, the fish themselves are, they're like a ½ an inch long when they come out. And unlike live bearers like guppies, these they actually have the parents actually have an umbilical cord to their babies when they're inside the womb, and so that just helps those babies get really, really big really quickly, and then when they're born, there's less fry, but they're much, much bigger. And as you can see, it is definitely a winning strategy for these fish, at least in the fish room. Because they do very well, and then they don't predate on the babies because they're just so big when they come out. So these guys have a tank all to themselves. Over here we have a fish, that I love and I hate at the same time. This is Iliodon furcidens, and it is also known as the trout Goodeid, and it is a very stunning fish. As you can see, it's got the yellow underbelly, it's got the black mottled pattern. It is just an amazing looking fish. They're highly active. They're always on the move. They keep the tank sparkling clean. They pick all the algae, and they're always looking around for something to eat. And I think what's going on is they're also eating their fry, because I have not seen a single fry. I have not successfully raised a single fry in over a year of having these guys. And as you can see, I have some little breeder boxes that I've put together to try to help provide some cover, and it's just not working. I haven't been able to raise a single one. So this is a fish that if I wanted to breed these, I may have to pull the females and then build some sort of fry trap isolation tanks to successfully get those fry, because I can tell you without a shadow of doubt, as soon as they are born in this tank, they're getting eaten. And then last tank up here on the top is the Amica splendens, another Goodeid. These ones are also a really cool fish. The babies come out quite large, and I would say they're somewhere between like a Chaptalictes pardalis and an Iliodon furcidens. They're a little bit more chasey, like they'll go after some of the smaller fry, but I haven't seen them predate on the fry. You can see they've got some cover there, and they seem to do okay because I've got a number of them in all different sizes. One thing that I did note is that these will harass any type of quarry cat you put in with them endlessly, and so I had to take all of the quarries out of this tank because they just wouldn't leave them alone. So interesting behavior from this fish, Amica splendens. Again, a really cool fish. All right, and with that, that is all of the aquariums on this rack, but we have a lot more to look at down here. And so the first thing I wanted to do here was just touch on this table that I have, and this is my live blackworm table. So you can see here I've got some dead fish. I've got some zucchini that's almost completely broken down. We've got a number of green beans here. A lot of this was just leftover from feeding my Ancestris plecos and just cleaning up my aquariums. So nothing goes to waste in the fish room. Even the fish that die of old age become food for the live blackworms. And as you can see, the blackworms just burrow themselves into the substrate, and they have this entire table to themselves. This is an aquaponics flood and drain table. It's about 2 feet by 4 feet by 3 inches tall. And so essentially what I've done is I put one small pump in my sump tank, which pumps up here to the back, and it brings water in to this table. And then over on the far side, you can see we have 2 overflows, and these are 1-inch overflows. And I've got a filter screen on top of those so that they don't get too clogged up. And so that water then travels back down into my sump. So this is a recirculating system for my live blackworms, which allows me to endlessly feed all of my fish. Cory cats love them. The Spanish Ribbed Newts love them. Basically everything loves them. And they've been really hard to find recently, the live blackworms. So really excited to get a really healthy colony of those going. And you may say, what is all the stuff that's hanging out in this table? Well, I found that having something at this height, like arm height, is a lot of fun. And it's sort of like a sandbox for adults. It's really easy to get your hands in here. It's really easy to play around with what's going on in here. And so I've used this as a staging ground for some crayfish. So you can see I've got some crayfish in isolation here. Some really interesting color variation. As you can see, that one's like blue between these crayfish. But I feed them green beans. The blackworms come up through there, and they eat the blackworms as well. And I also feed them some crushed up snails from time to time. And then I have one really cute baby pea wattle, Spanish Ribbed Newt. This guy was a little bit of an accident. He's about, I don't know, 2.5 inches long. You can see his gills are just about gone at this point. And I threw some eggs very early on into one of my heavily planted tanks. And then, I don't know, 2 months later, I found this one Spanish Ribbed Newt that had survived in the tank. And I wasn't specifically feeding him anything. He just found enough to eat from the infusoria that was in the tank to maybe some of the small fry that he was finding. So really interesting, and this has sort of kickstarted my interest in actually breeding these guys. So we've got that one there. We've got the sump here. We'll talk about the sump in a minute, but before that I wanted to go look at some of the Spanish Ribbed Newt fry that I'm growing out. This is a 20-gallon bucket, and it's on wheels so I can move it around. But as you can see, we've got, I don't know, 300-400 of these Spanish Ribbed Newt fry, and it's going to be tricky to get a picture of these. The water is pretty cloudy at the moment. It's because I just cleaned the sidewalls, and it just got a lot of junk up into the water column. So I do a lot of water changes on these. Essentially like a 50% water change once a day, and I'm feeding once a day very heavily with brine shrimp. But these guys are about ½ an inch long, I would say, and they've got front arms forming, and they've still got their gills. So they look indistinguishable from a axolotl fry at this size. And the only thing that's different is I haven't seen these guys try to cannibalize each other, which is pretty nice. There's no heat on these guys. They don't need it. All they have is a couple sponge filters over there that are suspended so they don't crush any of the fry on the bottom. And that's it. I feed them once a day really heavily with live baby brine shrimp, and then I do a 50% water change, and they seem to be doing really well. I might lose 1 or 2 per day, and that's about it. So I think I started with around 500, and now I've got 300 to 400 left, something like that. So we'll see how big they get and what I end up doing with them. I might have to bring some of them to some upcoming auctions. All right, we're rounding the corner here on the fish room. I think it's worth talking about this here real quick. This is my brine shrimp hatchery. I'll do a more in-depth video on how I constructed this and how it works and how I harvest brine shrimp from this. But the long and the short of it is these are 5-gallon carboys that you would brew beer in. They're the same size as like a 5-gallon water jug for like a water bubbler. And essentially what I've done here is I've just cut a hole in the bottom of them. I flipped them over, cut a hole in the bottom of them, and it's acting as essentially a much larger version of what you would have as a 2-liter bottle DIY brine shrimp hatchery. So I've got 3 of those going. I harvest one of them and reset one of them every single day. So essentially the ages of each of these batches is 0 hours, 24 hours, and 48 hours. And so by 48 hours, they're ready to go. And so I harvest those, reset it, refill it, and then the next day I harvest from the next one. So that's the brine shrimp hatchery. Behind it, we have tucked away in the corner here, the 300-gallon Rubbermaid turtle stock tank. And this is one of the only things that has survived from the previous fish room. It's sort of hidden here amongst a bunch of plants. The tank itself isn't that impressive. It's just bare bottom, and there's only 3 turtles in here, which are going to be, again, very difficult to film. You can maybe see them back there a little bit. They're very shy. They've been in past videos before, but I have 1 female and 2 males left in here, and I may actually be looking to rehome those at some point here soon, because my thought is I may actually transform this into a Spanish ribbed newt breeding colony. So moving all of those adults from the 50-gallon lowboy into this 300-gallon stock tank to give them much more room to grow and to hang out. So that's what's going on in this corner of the fish room. We've got a wine cooler full of white worms. We've got gigantic cans of green beans. We've got all kinds of foods that we're feeding, and just a little bit of a mess going on with the rest of the fish room. But this is just a quick look of everything that is included in the fish room as it currently exists. I'm going to do much more detailed videos on a whole bunch of topics here in the future. So if you want to see individual videos on things, hit the subscribe button, hit the like, and let me know. All right, now that we've seen all of the fish and turtles and newts and crayfish and worms and all kinds of stuff going on in this fish room, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the construction of this aquarium rack system, because I think it's very important, and I think people can learn a few things about how this was put together. There is actually a video on my channel from 3 years ago where I built this stand, and so it is a 2x6 and 2x4 constructed stand. It has dado joints which are cut into the sides. So you can see this 2x6 has this notch cut out, and so that allows this 2x4 to rest and carry all of the weight all the way down the leg to the ground. And so you know, that board can span 4 feet no problem without any other support, because all of that weight is resting on those legs. So this is an incredibly well-built stand that's going to last quite a long time. And again, if you want a little bit more detailed view of all of the cuts and all of the boards, and this without all of the tanks and stuff on it, there's a video on that on my channel. All right, what we have on top of that is just a piece of, I think this is 1/2 inch styrofoam. And if we look up underneath, it doesn't actually go the entire length. I just cut out strips and then sort of glued them together. And so it allows the entire base of this frame of the aquarium to rest on the foam, to self-level itself, and that sits right on top of the wooden stand. And then we have the tank. And again, these are the 50-gallon lowboy aquariums from Zoomed, and each one of these is drilled, you can see in the back, with a 1-inch overflow bulkhead. And I believe it's a Tetra Pond pre-filter sponge, which just happened to be a very, very coarse sponge. And it has the 1-inch center hole through it. And so that allowed me to create those pre-filter overflows. And then you can see on the other side, we have our water coming back in, our return water system. And there are return plumbing is coming from our sump. And we'll talk about our sump in just a second. So, over the tops of these tanks, we have a couple different things. We have the air lines. We've got an air loop system. We've got our linear piston air pump over in the corner. And so we've got air lines running to every single tank. We also have LED lights mounted above every single tank. And this middle row of tanks, we also have a plant light, which is helping some of the Java moss stay alive. And so that's what's sort of up above the tanks. The lids to these tanks are a twin wall polycarbonate, which is cut to the dimensions of the top frame of this tank. And as you can see on the sides, this is the second time that I've created lids for my aquarium fish room. And so on the sides I have a thermoplastic. It's basically a moldable plastic. You heat up the beads and then you can form it sort of like silly putty, and then when it dries it forms to whatever shape that you've made. And so what that's allowed me to do is protect the cells, the inside cells of this twin wall polycarbonate from moisture and from fish food and all kinds of other stuff, so that there isn't stuff stuck in between that would be impossible to otherwise clean. That happened in my last fish room with my last lids, and it wasn't a lot of fun. So you can see the cell walls are open along the edges, so I've sealed them all along the edges, and then all along this finger hole that I've cut, and then in the back corner where we have our return plumbing coming in as well. All right, so that gives you an idea of the tanks, the stand, what's above them. Let's talk about how this rack is plumbed together. So you saw the 1-inch overflows with the overflow screen pre-filter. And if we sort of get in the back here, you can see that 1-inch overflow immediately goes into a 2-inch PVC, and that runs all the way along the back here, and there's one of these for every single level of tanks. And so the tubing here isn't very long. It's just sticking into that 2-inch PVC T, which allows air exchange. There's no siphon that's created, so there's an air break there. And that water then travels the length of each one of these racks over to our sump system. So let's go take a look at the sump. There's a lot going on in the sump, and we may need a separate video to talk about everything in more detail. But essentially, each one of those 2-inch PVC lines has that overflow water coming from it. We have a snorkel line up here, which just allows additional air entry in here. And so all of that water spills over down here into this central 2-inch line, which comes in back here. And this is a pond tub here. I think it's around 60 or 70 gallons. And so we have a uniseal in the back, and the 2-inch line comes all the way into this first barrel. And this is our mechanical filter barrel. So all of the water from all of the tanks has to travel here first. And essentially what we have here is a 55-gallon barrel, which is cut down. And then I think it's like a 30-gallon barrel or a 20-gallon barrel, which is also cut down. And there's an inner chamber here, and then there's an outer chamber here. And so the water first has to go through the inner chamber. And this is like a prospecting, like gold collecting pan, which has a stainless steel mesh to it. And so that allows me to just catch a lot of the solids here first in here. And I also have just a filter pad, like a blue bonded filter pad in there, just to catch some of the junk. And then inside the center there, it's gonna be very difficult to see. We just have Metalla filter mats. So just round pieces of Metalla from very coarse to more fine, which go down progressively more fine as they go down in the middle. And then we got a bunch of holes drilled in the bottom of this blue barrel. And so that allows the water to be gravity fed through all of those Metalla mats into the larger 55-gallon barrel, the white barrel here. And then what has to happen is all of that water has to go back up through our 2 inches of filter foam. And so this is just like a solid piece of filter foam that's all the way around. And so there's a lot of surface area here. And so that allows that water to go up through the filter foam, which catches more of the fine particles. And then it spills out these holes on the side into the rest of the sump system here. So that's sort of like a look at how the water gets from the tanks into the sump. Once the water is in the sump, it's pumped into a second 55-gallon barrel, which has also been cut down, and that has our K1 micro media in it, our fluidized bed. And I think I need to put one more air stone on here to get a little bit more flow going, but this has our biologic bacteria in it, and it's self-cleaning media. It lasts forever. It's really good stuff. If you haven't used it before, go check it out. You can also see this little blue line that's spitting water in, and that is our auto water change system. So continuously, 24 hours a day, we have water coming into this sump tank, just like we did in the last fish room. And over time, the water level will get too high in this sump barrel. And then I have a sump pump, a float activated sump pump, and then a secondary emergency sump pump in here to pump that water out. So we get a water change continuously in this sump system, which also feeds into all of the aquariums, which means I never really have to do water changes at all to this system, which is a huge time saver. It is just enormous. And so we're getting, I think it's 40 gallons per day of fresh water pumped into this tank that goes through a 3-stage carbon block filter. And so that is fresh, clean water 24 hours a day. The one thing we will not see, because it's tucked behind this barrel, is our 1-inch line. There is a DC pond pump back there, which pumps this water back up this 1-inch line, and then that goes to each level of the aquariums, and it feeds the water back into those tanks. And this little blue box here is the controller for the DC pump. And just like the fact that we have subtropical fish in here that don't need the high temperatures, DC pumps, return pumps, are a really great idea for cost savings in terms of electricity, because it allows you to fine tune with that knob the amount of flow that you're producing for the tanks. And so when you have enough flow, you leave it right there. If it's an AC pump, you're going full throttle all the time and you're wasting electricity. And so I'm able to dial that back and get it exactly where I need to, and then I'm not wasting any electricity in the process. There are two heaters in this sump. I run those during the winter just to keep a little bit of the chill off. They are off during the summer completely. And so this fish room, the tanks themselves stay around 65 degrees is what I'm aiming for. Okay, one other thing here is how I siphon these tanks. And if you notice down here, we have 2-inch lines here, which allows me to put my siphon hose directly into these. And we have one there, we've got one here, and we've got one here at the intersection between each of the two tanks. And that runs into a separate 2-inch drain line, which goes into this barrel. And this is my wastewater barrel. So all of that siphon junk that I take out of any one of those tanks ends up here. And there's a little sort of like pre-filter basket here that collects a lot of the heavy, gross stuff that I'm able to just throw away every once in a while. And then in here we have another bag to protect it, but we have another sump pump. And then we have a float switch. So as I'm siphoning the junk out of the tanks, most of it ends up in that basket, which I'm able to throw out. The rest of the water and wastewater ends up in here. As it gets high enough, the sump pump activates and it just pumps the rest of that water out of this barrel. So easy peasy to get the tanks nice and clean. Well, relatively clean. As you can see, all of these tanks still do have some debris in them. And my philosophy here is that these are breeding tanks. They have white bottoms to them and white backs. And I would rather see the waste and the mulm and the debris so that I can siphon it out and keep the tanks clean. The alternative is that I don't see it and it builds up. So if you have a tank with a really deep gravel bed, this is the amount of detritus and debris that you could expect to enter that gravel bed each and every single day. And so instead of just hiding it, I'd rather siphon it out and keep it relatively clean. So it might not look perfect and pristine and crystal clear white, but that's okay because at least we can see it and then we know we can get rid of it in pretty short order. There's a number of other things in these aquariums that we can talk about in future videos. I've got these really cool DIY filters. We've got the Pleco cave stands. We've got a lot of different things going on, a lot of DIY projects to cover throughout the fish room. I've got a lot of live cultures that I'm doing for a lot of my different fish. I found that one really important way to succeed with breeding fish is to have a lot of different live foods, a lot of different selections, different types, different sizes, constantly culturing so that you have what you need on hand when you have fish that are spawning. And it just seems like it's a much cleaner food, more sustainable food. As you can see, we've got a sustainable theme going on here in the fish room, and it's just more natural. And so I'm happy to feed more live foods to these fish. In fact, down here, sort of tucked away, you already saw the brine shrimp hatcheries. Down here we have a number of different live cultures. We've got banana worms, Walter worms, micro worms. Over on the wall over here, we've got vinegar eels. And so we've got a good selection. Down here we have paramecium going. We got a great selection of live foods to feed these fish. So however small or large the fish are, we're gonna have something to feed them, which is really exciting for now and for the future of breeding in this fish room. But anyways, guys, that is the quick tour of the fish room Again, this is winter of 2023. A lot going on, a lot has changed. If you have questions, if you want to see more in-depth videos about a specific topic, definitely let me know. But I am back, I am on YouTube, and I am looking to create more content here in the future. So look out for some live streams. I'll experiment with some shorts, although I don't know how well they're gonna do. But for sure, we're gonna do more DIY videos. As you can see, we've got a lot of DIY going on down here. And I look forward to the springtime when we can open up the greenhouse and the outdoor pond as well. So we'll have a lot more projects and a lot to see out there as well. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this look, this tour of the fish room, and I'll see you guys later.